There are people who learned early to read a room before they learned to read themselves. It is not maturity. It is not wisdom. It is not strength. It settles quietly, shaping behaviour long after childhood has passed. These people grow capable, reliable, and outwardly functional. They manage households, emotions, and expectations without complaint. They rarely ask for care themselves. Inside, something essential waits, unfinished and unnamed. They look fine while carrying a quiet, invisible weight. It follows them into adulthood, shaping relationships, identity, and rest in subtle, persistent ways. This is the psychology of kids who raise their parents. They are often spoken about with admiration. Responsible, selfless, the one who always had it together. Adults remember them as helpful children. Teachers trusted them. Families relied on them. There is usually a story told about how easy they were, how mature for their age, how surprisingly understanding. What is rarely noticed is what that understanding replaced. Because understanding, when it comes too early, often arrives where care should have been. This kind of childhood does not feel chaotic. That is part of what makes it so invisible. There may have been love, laughter, routines, even affection. But beneath it sat something unstable. A parent who was overwhelmed, emotionally inconsistent, preoccupied, lonely, or quietly struggling in ways never named. Children sense this long before they have language for it. Attachment researchers often observe that when emotional safety feels uncertain, children do not protest first. They adapt, so they become observant. They learn the temperature of a room the way other children learn rules of games. They notice tone shifts, pauses, sighs. They learn what makes things smoother, what makes things worse. They start editing themselves instinctively. Not because they're told to, but because connection depends on it. The nervous system learns its role early. Stay alert, stay useful. Don't add pressure. Psychologists have long noticed that children will protect attachment at almost any cost, even the cost of themselves. When a child senses that a parent needs support more than they can offer it, something quietly reverses. The child steps forward emotionally. The parent leans back, sometimes without realizing it. There is no announcement, no agreement, just a slow shift in gravity. This is where responsibility becomes identity. Being needed becomes reassurance. Winnicott described how a child may develop a false self, not to deceive, but to preserve relationship. For these kids, the false self is not loud or dramatic. It is competent, calm, capable. It keeps things running. It becomes the version of them that everyone depends on. And because it works, it is rewarded. What gets lost is harder to see. Their own fear has nowhere to land. Their own sadness waits politely. Their anger feels dangerous, not because it is punished, but because it might destabilize something fragile. Over time, emotion becomes something to manage, not experience. They don't explode, they don't collapse, they hold. Outwardly, this often leads to success. They grow into adults others rely on. The fixer, the listener, the stable one. Clinicians frequently see how these adults can sit with intense emotion without flinching, yet struggle to identify what they themselves feel. They are fluent in other people's inner worlds, but strangers to their own. Not numb, just unattended. There is often a quiet pride in this, a sense of being strong, needed, useful, But usefulness is not the same as being known, and eventually, a subtle emptiness appears. Not dramatic, not obvious, just a sense that rest feels uncomfortable, that receiving feels awkward, that closeness feels conditional. Belonging, when it comes, feels earned rather than given. Neuroscience suggests that nervous systems shaped around vigilance do not easily relax. Even when life becomes stable, the body keeps scanning. The mind stays slightly ahead of the moment, waiting, anticipating, ready to respond. Stillness can feel unfamiliar, even unsafe. When nothing is required of them, they may feel oddly restless, as if they are forgetting something important. This creates a deep paradox. These adults are often deeply empathetic, yet privately lonely. They can be surrounded by people and still feel unseen. They show up fully for others while quietly minimizing themselves. Relationships can become unbalanced without anyone intending harm. They give regulation, clarity, reassurance. They receive appreciation, gratitude, sometimes admiration, but not always care. Jung wrote about how parts of the self can be split off when they are not welcomed early. For kids who raise their parents, the dependent self often becomes one of those parts, not destroyed, just postponed, waiting for a time when it might be safe to exist. That waiting can stretch for decades. At some point, usually in adulthood, a question surfaces. Not loudly, more like a pause. Why does asking feel so heavy? Why does rest feel undeserved? Why does being needed feel safer than being loved? The answers do not arrive cleanly. They emerge slowly, through patterns noticed rather than moments remembered. Because this was never about one event. It was about a role that settled in quietly and stayed too long. Once that question appears, it does not demand attention. It waits. It shows up in small moments, in exhaustion that sleep does not fix, in relationships that feel strangely familiar, no matter how different the people are, in the subtle discomfort that arises when someone offers care without asking for anything back. For kids who raise their parents, being cared for can feel disorienting, almost intrusive, as if it disrupts a role that once kept everything stable. Psychologists often notice that these adults are exceptionally good at emotional anticipation. They sense shifts before words arrive. They know when to soften, when to reassure, when to stay quiet. This sensitivity once served a purpose. It reduced uncertainty. It kept connection intact. But carried into adulthood, it can quietly erase spontaneity. They respond before they feel. They adjust before they check in with themselves. The habit is so practiced, it feels like personality. This is why many of them describe a sense of distance from their own inner life. Not emptiness, more like a delay. Feelings arrive late, filtered through responsibility. They might know they are sad without knowing why, tired without knowing of what. There is often a vague sense of having skipped something essential, like a chapter that was never read, but still shapes the story. Attachment researchers sometimes describe this as role confusion, not in the clinical sense, in the lived sense. The child learned to regulate the adult, but no one consistently regulated the child. Over time, self-regulation became hyper-developed, while self-soothing remained undernourished. The result is an adult who can function under pressure, but feels strangely undone by quiet needs. This pattern also shapes how they experience intimacy. Closeness can feel safest when it involves caretaking. They may unconsciously gravitate toward people who need support, guidance, or stability. Not out of saviorism, out of familiarity. Love to them feels like responsibility. Calm feels like connection. Crisis feels like purpose. And when things are easy, something feels off. Clinicians frequently observe how these adults struggle with resentment they cannot quite justify. They give freely, they show up, and yet a tired bitterness sometimes seeps in. Not towards specific people, but toward the endlessness of being the one who holds everything together. They feel guilty for this resentment. After all, they chose to help. No one forced them, except that choice was made long before it could be conscious. Neuroscience suggests that when a child's nervous system becomes attuned to another's emotional state, it can blur the boundary between self and other. Emotional responsibility becomes diffuse. Even in adulthood, they may feel accountable for moods that are not theirs. Discomfort in a room feels like something they should fix. Silence feels like a signal. Conflict feels urgent, even when it isn't theirs to resolve. This is where the hidden pain lives. Not in trauma narratives, not in obvious neglect, but in the quiet erosion of self-prioritization. These adults often struggle to answer simple questions about what they want. Preferences feel negotiable, needs feel flexible, desire feels optional. They learned early that their internal world could wait. Jung spoke of the shadow as the parts of the self that were not allowed expression. For kids who raise their parents, the shadow often holds anger, neediness, softness, dependence. Not because these traits are wrong, but because they once felt unsafe. The shadow is not dark, it is unfinished, waiting for acknowledgement. There is often a moment of recognition when this pattern becomes visible. Not dramatic. Sometimes it happens while watching others receive care without explanation. Or noticing a sharp tenderness when a child is allowed to be messy, demanding, openly emotional. The reaction is confusing. Why does this feel personal? Why does this ache? Belonging and social pain research suggests that humans need to feel held without performing. For these adults, performance became the price of closeness. They were valued for what they provided, not for what they were still learning to become. Over time, this can create a quiet grief, not for what happened, but for what never did. They may begin to realize that they grew up early, but not whole. That maturity arrived before safety. That competence filled space where comfort should have lived. This realization can feel destabilizing because the role they built their identity around suddenly looks less like strength and more like adaptation. Yet even here, there is no sudden resolution, no clean transformation. The nervous system does not release its vigilance easily. Trusting rest feels risky. Letting others lead feels unfamiliar. Asking feels exposed. The body remembers the original assignment. Hold things together. Don't need too much. Stay ahead. And still something shifts, slowly, quietly. Awareness itself becomes a form of disruption. Not healing, not fixing, just seeing. Seeing how much effort it took to be that child. Seeing how long that effort continued. Seeing how much care was given outward, while remaining scarce inward. These adults often carry a deep empathy for human fragility. They understand exhaustion, overwhelm, emotional inconsistency. They rarely judge parents harshly, even their own, because they learned early how complex adults can be, how good intentions coexist with limitation. This empathy is real, but it often comes at the cost of self-exemption. There is a loneliness that can accompany this insight, a sense that no one ever noticed how much was being carried. That praise replaced protection. That gratitude stood in for guidance. This loneliness does not demand resolution, it simply asks to be named. The hidden pain of kids who raised their parents is not that they were unloved, it is that love arrived tangled with a responsibility. That care came with a role, that safety depended on competence. And once a nervous system learns that equation, it does not forget it easily. They may continue to move through life as anchors for others, steady, reliable, grounding. But beneath that steadiness is a quieter wish. To be met without managing, to be held without holding, to exist without scanning. There is no clear ending to this story, only an ongoing recognition that the child who once kept things together is still present, still working, still watching, and perhaps for the first time, beginning to wonder what it might feel like to be cared for without earning it.